You already watched a war get won without a single public shot fired. What you never saw was the room it was actually fought inside. Somewhere tonight, that same kind of room is open again. A handful of people you will never meet, deciding what your money will be worth tomorrow. Not a vote, not a headline, not even a meeting that will show up on anyone's calendar. A phone call, a closed door, a decision made quietly, hours before the market even opens. And by the time you see the number on your screen, it has already been decided, on your behalf, without you. You were taught to call this the market. You were taught to picture it like weather, something vast and impersonal that simply happens to everyone equally, rich and poor alike. It has never been weather. It has always had hands. You have simply never been shown them. 250 years ago, an economist gave those hands a name he almost certainly never meant literally. He called it the invisible hand. The idea that millions of small, selfish, uncoordinated choices somehow add up to order, all on their own, with no one person steering the outcome. It became the single most quoted line in the entire history of economics. It also became, quietly, the perfect place to hide. Because if everyone believes no one is steering the ship, then almost no one thinks to go looking for the wheel. And for 2.5 centuries, almost no one has looked. That is not, in fact, an accident of language. That is the disguise, still working. Here is what the metaphor conveniently leaves out. Somebody still has to be in the room before the room officially exists. Somebody still writes the first draft of the rule, long before the public vote on that rule ever happens. Somebody still picks up a telephone at 3 in the morning while everyone else sleeps soundly, entirely unaware that a decision affecting them was ever on the table. The market does not decide on its own, no matter how it is taught in a textbook. It only ever ratifies what was already decided somewhere quieter and earlier by someone who happened to hold a key to that particular room. 3 times now, history handed that exact key to a very small number of people. And 3 times they used it to build something that quietly outlived every one of them. A private library that became an emergency bailout. A duck hunting trip that became a nation's currency. A university scholarship that became a century of careful, patient placement. This was never conspiracy. It never needed to be. It is architecture, built in rooms you were never invited into, by hands that were never as invisible as you were taught to believe. This is, finally, the invisible hand. October 1907, and a failed attempt to corner the copper market collapses in New York, and within days the panic spreads the way it always spreads. Not because the money actually disappeared, but because enough people, all at once, simply believed that it might. Depositors form lines outside banks that were entirely solvent that morning and functionally insolvent by nightfall, purely on the strength of a rumor moving faster than any fact could catch it. There is no central bank to call for help. There is no emergency fund waiting, no government backstop standing by, no official whose job it is to stop what is happening. There is only whoever in that moment is both willing and able to. On the 3rd of November, the man who runs the largest private bank in the country sends the same short message to every major trust company president in Manhattan. Come to my library tonight. They arrive one by one at a marble building on Madison Avenue, beneath a ceiling painted centuries earlier for another empire entirely. And the front doors are quietly, deliberately locked behind the last of them. No government official is present in that room. No elected authority has been consulted or even informed. The wealthiest men in American finance simply take their seats around one table and begin, calmly, to decide who survives the week and who does not. By 4 in the morning, one man has personally reviewed the ledgers of every bank in question, weighed the solvent against the failing, and calculated almost to the dollar exactly how many millions each banker in that room will commit to the rescue. And then he tells them He does not ask them to sign the pledge in front of him. There is no law requiring any of this. There is no court on earth that could compel a private citizen to do it. It happens because one man in one room holds more real-time information, more available capital, and more sheer nerve than the entire United States government combined that night. And every person seated at that table already knows it. By morning, the panic breaks. The banks quietly reopen their doors. Most of the country will never learn how close it came to a full collapse of its own currency, because that collapse was absorbed, silently and privately, by men whose names had never once appeared on any ballot. Historians will later call this the exact moment America finally understood it needed a real central bank of its own, one that did not depend entirely on a single 70-year-old man staying awake all night inside his own house. But for one night in 1907, the financial system of an entire nation ran, in full, on the private judgment of one library. Here is the question that library should have left every one of us with. What happens the next time? When the man in the library is finally gone, and no one left standing has either his fortune or his nerve to lock those doors himself again. You do not solve that problem by hoping for another genius. You solve it by building a machine that no longer needs one. And 3 years after that single long night, 6 men would meet in complete secrecy to begin designing exactly that machine. November 1910, and one by one, spaced out over several days, 6 men leave New York separately, by different routes, on different trains, so that no reporter watching any single one of them would ever notice the pattern forming. They converge quietly and without ceremony at a private rail car waiting on a sidetrack at a station in New Jersey, a car that belongs to a sitting United States senator, hitched almost invisibly to the back of an ordinary southbound train, curtains already drawn before the first of them even boards. On board, they agree on the cover story before they agree on anything else that matters. They are duck hunters, they explain, simply heading south for the season. The servants are told nothing real. The press is told nothing at all. And for the entire week that follows, sealed away on a private club on an island off the coast of Georgia, the 6 of them address one another only by first name, spoken one at a time. Nelson, Harry, Frank, Paul, Piat, Arthur. Not one surname spoken aloud the entire week, in case a servant overheard and repeated it later without understanding exactly what he was repeating. What they build in that week is not technically a law. 6 private citizens cannot pass a law on a hunting trip, and every one of them in that rail car already knows it. What they build instead is a blueprint. The actual working shape of a national reserve system, branch by branch, power by power, drafted years before a single elected official is ever allowed to see a draft with any of their real names attached to it. The plan is renamed, revised, and carried quietly through Congress by other hands entirely. On the 23rd of December 1913, it becomes law as the Federal Reserve Act. Most people believe laws get written inside the buildings where they eventually get voted on. Decoders already know the vote is the very last step in the process, never the first. The room comes before the law. The blueprint comes before the debate that everyone assumes came first. By the time the public is even told a decision exists, the actual shape of that decision was already fixed. On a private island, by 6 men who were never elected to fix anything at all. That was never a flaw hiding inside the system. For the men who quietly designed it, that discretion was the entire point of the system. Rewind further still, back to 1877, to a very different kind of blueprint. A young diamond magnate in southern Africa writes a private document he privately titles his Confession of Faith, proposing something no banker on that later railcar would ever dare put down on paper. A secret society, built not to move money at all, but to move people. Its stated purpose: identify the most promising young minds passing through the finest universities and quietly attach them early to the exact institutions that would one day run the world in his place. He does not live long enough to build the society the way he first imagined it. He dies instead with a diamond fortune large enough to fund something almost as effective and far more publicly respectable. A scholarship announced in 1902, sending a fresh, hand-selected cohort of the most promising young people alive into one university every single year for well over a century since, without interruption. No one calls this a network out loud. Everyone simply calls it an honor. That, quietly, is the disguise still working exactly as it was designed to. Here is the through line connecting a private library, a hidden rail car, and a university scholarship fund. None of them ever needed to hide the money itself. Money leaves a paper trail almost everywhere it moves, no matter how carefully. What they actually hid was the intention behind it, the guest list, the closed meeting, the quiet criteria for who gets chosen and who never even learns there was a choice being made. Today, the descendants of that same instinct do not need islands, disguises, or first names only rail cars at all. A private family office does not file the public reports a corporation is legally required to file. Discretion for them was never an accident of the structure. Discretion is the entire structure. You have followed this codex a long way to arrive here, Decoder. You built the architecture, you sealed the vault, you watched an inheritance quietly outlast its own heirs, and an engine keep turning long after the people who built it were gone. You stood inside a quiet war fought entirely in rooms no camera was ever allowed near. Every single one of those stories, if you look closely enough, needed a room exactly like this one. A library, a rail car, a scholarship fund with a respectable name. Different decades, different disguises, the very same quiet hand, still moving. Right now, somewhere close by that you will never be personally invited into. The Codex does not end here. And you, Decoder, will be here when the next room finally opens. This is, at last, the invisible hand.